Welcome to the second session of Fliplanthropy, our rolling off the tongue series for wealth owners and those who have a vested interest in how wealth is distributed, which is everyone. So we're trying to really flip philanthropy on its head, find the key elements which are stagnating for years and that need serious subversion and serious twisting, and an often neglected area around this is the psychological underpinnings of our financial systems, our political systems, and also our systems of giving. And we're lucky to have Iris Brilliant with us today, a money coach extraordinaire, and somebody with loads of experience doing funder organizing, most notably with resource generation in the US, that has also been for us an inspiration in terms of how to organize, especially young people with wealth. And we're doing similar work with Guerrilla now and our own funder circle organizing. I'm super excited to do this with Iris, and I'm also really excited about the work that Iris is going to do soon in Germany with some reparation and I would say karmic restoration, I guess, from Nazi wealth. And I'm going to just pass it over to you, and you can give people context. I'm just excited to participate and be somebody who can share your work with others. So over to you, Iris.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And thank you everybody for joining and making time for today's workshop. I don't know if there's anything else I need to say other than I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States. I want to second what Ivan said. If I'm speaking too quickly and if anything's getting lost in translation, please let our hosts know. I will not be looking at the chat because I can't read what you all are saying while I'm talking at the same time. But I'll make sure to open it up for questions. And as Ivan said, we will not be recording when you ask questions. So welcome. And the way I see myself for today's workshop, I knew this was going to be a cross-class community here. So I tried to create some content that will be relevant and helpful for those of you who are kind of in that position of needing to work with wealthy people, but perhaps you don't yourself come from wealth. And of course, also some tools that will be relevant for those of you who do identify as wealthy. And I see my role as being a translator of what are some of the kind of challenging, harmful, hurtful behaviors that wealthy people might be doing, and helping to translate what might be going on in a way that I hope will be useful for you in your work moving forward. And for those of you, again, who do identify as wealthy, the invitation here is for you to assume that you do some of these behaviors and to engage with the tools in a way that will lead to deeper self-knowledge and self-awareness. And I'll also just name, I come to this work as someone who was raised as wealthy, very much steeped in affluent culture, competitive, superficial society growing up. And that's a lot of what informs my work, in addition to doing this work of organizing wealth holders, fundraising wealth holders, and coaching wealthy people for the last 12 years. So without further ado, let's get in. I'm just curious here if we could see a show of, I guess, emojis. Do you guys know how to add an emoji? I'm wondering who here has had perhaps an unsavory or difficult or painful interaction with someone who is wealthy, that left you hurt, confused, befuddled. I mean, I have. Anybody else? Got some emojis happening, got some pensive faces. Also, if you're wealthy, you can also have interactions with other wealthy people. That's hurtful, just to say. I would love to know in the chat, without getting into all the fun drama and details of the story, but I would love to know in the chat, what is some behavior that you've observed among people with wealth that you have found confusing, that you have found hurtful, that you want more clarity on? So please put in the chat. Kind of a, if you could ask a rich person why you do X, Y, and Z, lack of empathy, casual racism. What else? Entitlement. Oh, yeah. Entitlement. Good one. Next level micromanaging, capital M. Not appreciating gifts. Projection. Flakiness and unreliability, arrogance. This is great. I mean, this is honestly, I wrote a guide on patterns that wealthy people have, and you guys could have written the guide yourself. This is exactly what's in there. So I'm going to stop reading the chats, but I love reading all of these. It's good to know that these are international too, because so much of my work has been in the US, but it seems this confirms that, yeah, the floodgates have opened. Keep going. I'm not going to stop you. So let's talk about what is going on with rich people acting badly. I see this as, you know, the metaphor that I came up with today when I was thinking about the workshop is when we're fundraising wealth holders, when we're transforming, doing transformative organizing work with wealth holders, like the Gorilla Foundation is doing, resource transformation, right? These other networks that are asking more of wealthy people, not just to give money, but to also show up to movements, to be in cross-class community. The way I see that is when we're making those asks of wealth holders, we're knocking at the door of their wealth and of their power. And they open the door. And what we're first met with might not be the most pleasant thing, right? What we're met with is sometimes, and not always, but it's sometimes entitlement. It's sometimes arrogance. It's sometimes micromanaging. It's sometimes all of these behaviors that you all already beautifully named in the chat. And I want to talk about this first layer of who we're meeting and why they're there and how we continue without stopping there, if that makes sense. So when we engage with someone and they're rude, they're disrespectful, they're micromanaging and all these things, I feel we have a choice. And I'm going to be really overly simplistic here. The choice is you can either say this person sucks, they're a jerk, I don't want to engage with them. And the only way we can move the wealthy is through brute force, which leads you to one strategy, you know, it leads you on one pathway. That's not the pathway I'm going to walk with you on, but that's, you know, that's your choice. The other choice is to assume that that person wants to be in better relationship with you, wants to be in better relationship with the world, and does not have yet the tools, the ability, the X, Y, and Z to be able to do so. But if we assume that people that we're engaging with want to be in right relationship with us, want this better world that we're advocating for, but they're doing this behavior, there's like a mismatch happening that we need to help undo. Is this making sense? I'm just going to look at your little Zoom faces. Okay. I'm assuming you're here because you're more in that latter camp, that second camp that I named. So I have a document that part of me doesn't want to give you because I know you're just going to go read it and not listen. But I'm going to put it in the chat anyways. So before I do, this is a document on common class privilege patterns. It was created by a coworker of mine at Resource Generation, Jess Kelly, which I then took the liberty of adding a bunch of stuff to in my work. It's based off of, it's inspired by Tema Okun's document on white supremacy patterns. So you'll notice that a lot of these patterns are also have things in common with common white people patterns, because I really see these as, these are the patterns of wealth, of power holding, right? So they can work across identity. So I'm putting it in the chat, and if you want to just take a moment and skim through the different sections, we're not going to the part 2, the positive shifts. We're problem oriented right now. Um, so just take a moment and observe the different patterns that are in here. And I'll give you a minute to check that out. I'm curious what it feels like for folks who haven't seen this document yet. If you want to put in the chat what it feels like for you to see these patterns laid out in such a methodical way. Chat. Vindicated, yes. Good. Anything else? Sad. Yeah, some sadness. Okay. Does anyone want to elaborate on what the sadness is about? I'm curious.
I mean, since I'm camera friendly, some of these seem insurmountable, and that immediately puts me personally in like a bit of a defeatist position, that I really need to summon strength to overcome some things that are become quite integral parts of the psyche and the personality. So quite a challenge to undo.
I think I wrote sad because I feel that there's so much stuckness, and so I can really feel that there's just no participation in life, which I also associate with privilege, also with my own privilege. So yeah, an alienation in a way.
Yeah, thank you for that. So might be helpful actually for us to go to an exercise that I had a little bit later, but I think would be good to do now. So I really hear you on the sense of powerlessness and overwhelm. When I see this document and when I see things laid out, I feel empowered because I know exactly what to expect, right? Because you will see this again and again and again. It is predictable. Again, when we're knocking at the door of people's power and privilege, this is commonly what we will be met with. And for me, I find there's something comforting about knowing what to expect and then also not taking it personally when it occurs. And my hope is by the end of this that you all leave feeling a little less hopeless and overwhelmed. But for now, let's do an exercise. So I want to invite you to take a moment to think back to a time in your life when you were asked to confront, or when you had to confront an aspect of your own privilege or your own harmful behavior in a way that was really challenging for you. So thinking back to a time in your life when you were confronted with an aspect of your own privilege or harmful behavior that you carried that was challenging. The purpose here is to not beat yourself up, so don't let your inner critic have a heyday. The purpose is, we all have caused harm, right? We all have coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms that don't lead us to the best interactions, right? I would love to hear in the chat when you were confronted with your privilege or with realizing you caused harm, what was your initial reaction? I'm not saying your thoughtful, wise, integrated reaction, your initial honest reaction. Defensiveness, shame, defensiveness, shame, feeling like a fool, resistance, shrill defensiveness, panic, right? Yeah, I mean, same. Exactly, exactly. What did it take for you? Clearly you all have, oops, what did I do? Okay, clearly you all have processed this, I assume. What did it take for you to move beyond your defensiveness, to move beyond your shame? How did you do that? Self-reflection, time and space, being seen, curiosity, people at my side. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So there's like a common arc here of how change and transformation happens. You do something, you cause harm without meaning to, shame, defensiveness, feeling stupid, right? Self-criticism, avoidance, all of these common mechanisms. And then through curiosity, community, self-reflection, we're able to slowly move towards a new behavior, right? The same arc is true for people with power and privilege, and the same arc is true for those with wealth who we are trying to transform. And what I'll say again, you know, that choice that I gave you, that oversimplified choice of if a wealthy person is doing something that is harmful or destructive or confusing to you, you can write them off and just kind of give up on them, or you can get curious and move towards them. And I mean, then this is like the work, sometimes this feels like the work of the gods, especially for those of us who don't come with wealth. So you're always at choice in how you want to relate to these. But if you're really interested in transformative work with wealth holders, bringing in that beautiful curiosity of like, what is going on for you that you're this entitled? What is underneath that? And that's what I want to transition towards. So let's talk about what might be happening on the inside for wealth holders. And we will talk about what I call the boogeymen, and specifically the boogeymen of scarcity. Do people know what a boogeyman is, or is that word that makes sense? No. Boogeymen are kind of like not like evil spirits, but they're kind of like little ghosts that follow us around, that lead us astray, right? That kind of lead us off the path. Another way of thinking about it, it's just kind of like my cutesy language, but another way of thinking about it is just really common guards that are trying to protect people's wealth for understandable survival reasons, but no longer are really relevant. So let's talk a little bit about these boogeymen. First of all, this is a guide that I wrote for my clients and I wrote for wealth holders that leads to a journaling practice and exercises of us all confronting and engaging with our own boogeymen. So that's how this came about. And I'll put it in the chat and we will go to page 2. So on page 2, these are some incredibly common, when we're knocking at the door of people's money, let's say, which is something that I'm doing every single day in my work, like, hey, I think you could give a little bit more money. Hey, why don't we double our giving? Why don't we do X, Y, and Z? This is what comes up for my clients again and again and again. So some examples are the what if walrus, you know, and I put in cutesy language here because I find that the levity, the creativity helps people loosen up a little bit. Although, of course, I know this is serious and real. We're talking about resources that we really need to unlock. The what if walrus just comes up with an infinite amount of things that could go wrong in my life that would require more money. The what if walrus does not ever come up with things that could happen that might require me to have less money. So a common one in the US is, what if I end up homeless? I don't know that it would be as common in Europe, I'm not sure, but here it might sound absurd to you to know that I'm working with people who have tens of millions of dollars who are deeply afraid of becoming homeless. And what I would say about that is it speaks to the level of fear that is so strong that it can seduce us into thinking that giving away even a tiny amount of money will have such drastic impacts on our lives. So these aren't necessarily rational thoughts, but these are the fears that come up when I'm asking my clients and inviting them to give away more money. I had a client once who has an unimaginable amount of wealth, and I was asking him to just double his giving, really giving like less than 10% of his wealth. And the thing that came up for him was, what if the electrical grid fails and society collapses and I'll need to have all these different houses to take care of my kids? And I was just like, I can't believe how creative you are. Like, that was the first thought I had. Like, that's a wildly, your what if walrus is very creative, right? But at the end of the day, it's that same fear of, am I going to be okay? Which I think is a human existential anxiety and insecurity that we all have, right? I mean, I have that. I assume everyone here has that. Am I going to be okay? That's ultimately what's underneath a lot of these so-called boogeymen, right? The difference between potentially your human insecurity or anxiety and that of someone who is incredibly wealthy is that the wealthy have the ability to soothe that fear with money. That's the only difference. I'm just wondering if there's any like clarification questions so far before we continue. I also welcome vibes if you're like, this is resonating, this doesn't make sense. Yeah, so true. Questions, vibes. Thanks, Juliet. Thinking, maybe people are thinking. Well, I will continue assuming this makes sense until I see questions. Cool. Another one that I see really commonly, especially among assigned female people, especially among inheritors, those who did not make the money themselves, is a deep insecurity of not being smart enough, good enough with money, good enough with math, etc., to be able to give away more money, right? Including also a common, I'm seeing some nods. So that's like, I can't express how common that one is. And a desire of like, once I go to, maybe I should go to business school, maybe I should take this 5-year course on money, and then I'll feel comfortable enough to give away more money. And I'm always like, no, no, no. You don't need to have a business degree to know you have more money than you need. And you can do it. But again, it's that fear that goes to a very kind of rational, logistical place of like, if I just had the right training, then I could finally feel like I was making the right choice. But it comes down to just this deep insecurity, right? Of feeling not smart enough, feeling not capable enough, feeling not adult enough, feeling not ready enough. And if we wait until wealth holders feel ready enough and competent enough to give away the money they need to give away, we'll be waiting forever. A lot of this work that we're asking of people is to move towards courageous action in the face of the unknown, in the face of not having like the promise on the other side that you will be okay, you'll have made the right decisions, it'll all work out perfectly. And again, I think that's another point of a place we can relate to, right? Like, who here can't relate to that fear of making choices when you're not totally sure what's going to be on the other side of that choice? Just the difference here is we're talking about potentially millions of euros, right? We're talking about a lot of resources that are on the line with these emotional choices. Maybe I'll just go through one more. This is especially for those of you who are working with wealth holders in a way where you're engaged in a donor community, you're helping them build community, maybe you have a giving circle, the Fellowship of the Bling, resource transformation. A really common thing that I see among my clients is, I don't want to give away too much money because then I won't be a donor anymore. And then I won't have community anymore. I won't get to belong in this donor circle. Why would these social justice movements want anything to do with me if I'm not giving away more money, if I'm not their major donor? right? And we can like grimace and judge at that, like, why do you need to be a donor forever? But if you could take a moment and just imagine that the only role and way you've had of really participating in grassroots organizing, of participating in communities is through money, you might be able to start to understand that it does bring up insecurity and fear of how are you going to have meaningful connections and relationships if you give away enough money to the point where you're no longer a major donor to all of these organizations, right? That's a really common one that I see. Okay, the last one is the people-pleasing pelican. And I swear to you, I think that so much of the world's wealth is bound up in just the people-pleasing relationships between clients and their financial advisors, between wealth holders and their parents. I work with majority inheritors, so that's a lot of my perspective. But there are, wealth is very relational. So there's always other people that are related to your wealth in some way, be it that they work for you to manage your money, be it that they're the ones who gave it to you, be it that they're your partner, your spouse, your family members who share that wealth with you. And so it's rare that you're making decisions about your money that don't affect other people and other relationships. And if you're really stuck in people-pleasing patterns, that's going to hold up the wealth redistribution process. I do want to pause and have a moment of engagement. I'm wondering how this is landing for folks. I'm wondering if wealth holders here want to chime in on anything. So I welcome chats, and I'm going to read this one. So are these related to a fear that comes from not trusting their own capabilities to earn? Hugely, hugely. So something I always tell my clients is get a job and make your own money. That is always the tune that I carry, hitting all the buttons. Okay, great. Because I really think it's incredibly disempowering to live off of inherited wealth, because you will never know for sure that you could live off of what you earn, and you will forever be in a holding pattern in regards to the wealth. And so I always encourage clients to find paid work, to move towards a path of living off of what we earn, because I think it is important. I think it's empowering. And I think until we do that, we're not fully able to, we're not at choice in how we relate to the wealth, right? Because we need it. Anyone else want to chime in? I also welcome, okay, I appreciate it. Are we equating philanthropy to a feel-good pill as against striving for conditions? So I am not equating philanthropy as a feel-good pill. The way I'm approaching this is that wealth redistribution for those who have more money than they need is really good and healing for the wealth holder. And it's also good and healing for the world. And my intention here is not about creating a feel goodness. It's about strategically moving resources and hopefully moving resources to social justice movements and movements that are really going to create systemic change. But not about yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about that one. Okay. Any questions about the boogeyman, or anyone else want to chime in? Secrecy, huge, yeah, not just for Germans, but especially for Germans. So when you all shared well, maybe I'll say this, there's so much shame and secrecy that is wrapped up in having access to wealth. A lot of us received very explicit messages from our family to keep money a secret. And some of us received them more implicitly, right? Of just kind of seeing that conversations about money were awkward or didn't go very well, or, things like that. But in general, I think secrecy is also the glue of what really keeps capitalism in place and what keeps classism in place. Because if we all went around disclosing our net wealth every day, talking about our salaries every day, I think things would change a lot more rapidly. So secrecy is a way in which we can protect our power and wealth without having to confront it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what do we then do? So you knock at the door of somebody's money and power. You're faced with their entitlement. You're faced with stinginess. You're faced with micromanagement. You get to know them a little bit more. Perhaps you start to see that they're looping. You know, if you ask them, what's getting in your way of increasing your giving? And they say, what if, what if, what if? You can say, oh, here's the what if walrus that Iris told me about. If you start to see them spinning their wheels about what their financial advisor is going to think, what their parents will think, what their partner will think, you say, oh, it's the people-pleasing pelican. I knew this guy. You can start to identify those really common fear-driven coping mechanisms that come up for people. So what do we then do? In an ideal world, we meet these boogeymen with curiosity. We meet them with compassion, right? We don't validate the fears themselves. Like we don't say like, you're totally right. Of course you could end up on the streets tomorrow if you gave away another $100. No. We don't validate the fears. We validate the emotions that are there. Like, wow, this seems really scary for you. It seems like there's a lot at stake for you. Or it feels like there's a lot at stake for you. I realize this money is really connected to your dad. This money is really connected with your financial advisor. This money is really connected with your sense of community. This money is really connected with your sense of belonging. Validating the emotions that come up and reflecting back what you see, if it's appropriate to your role. I recognize you guys aren't money coaches, but if it's appropriate to the relationship and to your role, just reflecting back what you're seeing with compassion to the best of your ability, not agreeing with the fears, but agreeing that emotions are valid, and getting really curious. Getting also curious about what is behind those fears, because there's another door behind them, which we'll talk about, right? So questions that might bring people out of the boogeyman way of being are, why is wealth redistribution important to you? You know, what is your vision for the world? Helping them connect with a vision that is bigger than the fear. Reminding people of why they signed up to even be in this network or be part of this organization to begin with. That can be really, really anchoring and a really powerful tool. Another might sound contradictory, but is to believe that the person you're engaging with is resilient and adaptable and creative and strong. Believing that they can handle big challenges. Believing that they can rewrite how they're relating to money in a way that's rewriting how their family has previously related to money and power. It's kind of like believing in you, which we do as organizers, right? We believe that the people we're organizing are powerful, capable, resilient. So even in the face of fragility, even in the face of reactivity, entitlement, treating the person you're engaging with as if you really believe they're resilient and they can handle these fears. And figure it out. They can handle creating conflict in their family and working through that. They can handle the possibility of regret. They can handle the possibility of having to get a paid job because they gave away so much money. They can figure out how to make friends in a way that's not just based on them being wealthy. Is this making sense to people? And this is part of how we move from a donor service where we are serving the wealthy, where we are kind of doing a dance to get people's money. This is where we really shift towards like seriously transformative work of not just getting people to give money, but of supporting people to rethink how we engage in our relationships, how we engage in our families, how we engage. This is deep work, right? Like we're getting to some deep existential stuff. Okay, so what is behind, let me just see if there's anything else. I think a huge thing that I can't underscore enough. Yeah, when we treat donors as fragile, No way. Edgar Villanueva just wrote something really beautiful about that I reposted. He calls it donor fragility, but what he means is the fragility that we as fundraisers have, where we treat donors as fragile and bend over backwards. And I would say the number one thing my clients can't stand across the board is knowing that someone is sucking up to them, people pleasing them, doing a dance for them. It's very dehumanizing. It's not a good feeling for most people. And so I know that this is kind of like counterintuitive, right? But the more you can be authentic and real, and also the more you can raise the bar of the expectations you hold of how wealth holders will behave, actually, the better the relationships will go. If you hold a really low bar for me, you don't respect me. If you raise the bar and you expect me to be on time, you expect me to not flake, you expect me to give my gifts on time, you expect me to increase my giving in a way that's appropriate to what I have access to. And when I don't meet those expectations, you talk to me about it. That is respect. And that again is moving towards more of a donor organized, like a transformational relationship and not just a transactional one. Is this making sense to people? Okay, cool. Another piece I'll say is I want all of you to be working on your own relationship with money. Like we can only take people as far as we have gone ourselves. For those of you who weren't raised as wealthy and you're in a profession where you're working with wealthy people every day, I encourage you to work on in therapy or in whatever modalities you do, ways that you've been hurt by people with power and privilege, and making sure you're doing your own healing work and healing journey. And we all have baggage with money. So making sure you are deliberately working on your own money messages, what you were taught about money growing up, what money was like for you growing up, what each of your caregivers modeled to you about money. All of that will really serve you in this work as well. Okay. So I know I've used the door metaphor like 10 times, but I'm going to use it one more time. Just to review, we knock on the door, say, hey, I want your money. I want you to give away more money. I want you to give up some of your power. I want you to come over here and participate in movement work. We're knocking on that door. We get met with entitlement, flakiness, rudeness, whatever. This is worst case scenario. Some wealthy people have done a lot of work and you won't receive that. But worst case scenario, we get met with some unsavory behavior. We knock at that door. We start to get to know the boogeymen, right? The what if walrus, the people pleasing pelican, the insecurity impala, and so on. We knock on another door, and what is behind that door is a very vulnerable, afraid aspect of this person, like a deep existential fear, a deep existential fear that can't be reassured and it can't be fixed, right? So, for example, will anyone actually love me if I don't give money? Will people actually enjoy my company, or do they just want me because I have money? AKA, am I lovable? Am I worthy? Am I smart enough? I'm afraid that I'm actually incompetent, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not capable enough. I'm afraid I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing in my life. Right. And these deep fears, like you can feel a difference in the energy in our room, right? Like when I say these fears, they land really differently, right, than the other pieces because they feel like the truth. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't argue with that. Yeah. You're afraid you're not lovable. You're afraid that people only want you for your money. You're afraid that you don't know what you're doing with your life. You're afraid of ruining your family. You're afraid of living a life that wasn't worth living. You're afraid of making huge, horrible mistakes, right? First of all, those are things we can all relate to. The difference, of course, is that some of us have millions of euros that we can use to soothe those fears. But when we are able to get wealth holders to a place of being with that deep insecurity and fear, That's when a lot of stuff starts to really change and transform. Because then we can start to support people to really start to see the ways in which we're using money to avoid facing those deep existential fears. We're using money to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. And there's so much liberation on the other side of being with those deep insecurities that can't just be fixed overnight. You can also start to imagine, and this is something I walk clients through a lot. Let's say, for example, someone's deep fear is that they're not lovable. They don't know how to make community unless they are giving money. That's the way that they've learned how to make friends. If we get to that point, isn't there like, there's so many different solutions we can actually move towards. There's so many practices we can move towards. Like, oh, you really feel afraid you don't know how to make friends. Let's start working on making friends in ways that have nothing to do with money. You know, why don't you start getting engaged in this other organization where your role isn't to be a major donor and your homework is to go make some friends, right? Like, we can start to come up with some creative practices to support people to work with that fear and relate to it in a way that's different than just throwing millions of euros at the fear. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions, thoughts, feelings?
I like the idea of unlovability being the ultimate common denominator. It's something that so many can tap into, and I guess everybody has their own version of a story that, at least those whose traumas result in unlovability tendencies, will have their own narrative as to why that is. And I think most of the time just being seen as somebody who can have something in common with you, even though there is a class and economic divide, that divide gets bridged by an emotional relationality in this way, which I guess is the beginning of any kind of understanding or building of common understanding.
Thank you so much for that. And that, you know, it feels connected to the chat in here from, well, I guess I won't say participant names for the recording, but there's a chat in here about like, how do you, like, Iris, you're starting to sound like a therapist. Yes, my bad. How do you have healthy boundaries when you're working with rich people when you're not their therapist? Very good question. And with what you're saying, so Ivan, I think, is pointing out something really beautiful, which is at the very least, if you can hold this framework just internally without saying any of these therapy questions, I think it will really change how you relate to wealth holders. And I encourage you to hold on to this framework and notice what changes for you in your fundraising with wealth holders, right? Even if you're just holding inside without saying out loud, oh, you're doing X, Y, and Z defense mechanism. I can imagine that this is linked to some type of fear and security. It might just start to naturally and subtly shift how you fundraise. So of course, it's not always appropriate to be inviting people into such vulnerability when that's not your role. But at the very least, I find it's more exhausting to work with people when I'm not connected to their humanity. And when I'm seeing them is just, if I'm judging them, if I'm outraged by their behavior constantly and unable to connect with why, it's really draining for me. I can get through a lot more challenging situations and a lot more hard work when at least some part of me knows that on the other side of this behavior is someone who's just struggling and doesn't yet have the tools. So just for your own sake, to hold this. And of course, to respect your own, whatever professional boundaries you need to have in this work. Let's see what else is in here. Yeah. Yeah, so again, I think I should really be careful here where I am not saying, go do this with all of the wealthy people you know and use them as your, you know, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is one framework that's really different from the like, eat the rich, rich people are bad and the enemy. This is a different framework I'm offering you about what I see is happening behind the scenes internally for wealth holders when we're asking them to increase their giving, when we're asking them to do courageous things with money. I am not advising you to go and do this with your clients. And I think it will backfire if you don't have the consent and if this isn't part of your relationship setup with them. I think over time, if you can build trust with clients, with donors, and so on, at some point you might say something like, it seems like you, like so many people, have a lot of fear that's connected with the money you have access to. Have you considered getting more support around that? Referring them to money coaches, referring them to therapists who hopefully have skills around this topic, referring them to these peer communities like Resource Transformation, like Gorilla Foundation, right? Where they can get peer support. So just identifying that there's a need for support around money that you can't meet and helping them figure out how to get that need met can also be incredibly helpful. It's so true. So with fundraising, I think it's really hard to fundraise in a way where you're empowered and you're like, I don't need your money and I'm just going to hold these high expectations of you and have this conversation when in fact you do need their money and you are in a position of relying on that client's money. So I think that I'll just name, I think that's a difficult, that can be just an objectively difficult position to be in. I think ideally none of our organizations are held up by one sole person where we can have more of the freedom to push and challenge wealth holders without being terrified of losing their access to wealth. So part of it's like an organizational structure issue, right? And again, the other part I'll say is again and again, I notice this counterintuitive pattern where when we do expect more of wealthy people and we don't tiptoe and we are direct and we are authentic, we just tend to have better results. So I think that it's a risk that you have to assess if it's worth taking for yourself in your current role. But in general, that's what I see time and time again with progressive, self-reflective donors. I should also add that massive caveat. Okay, let me just look at my agenda and see something. So I want to just touch on one other thing and then we'll open, or two other things and then we'll open it up. Something that came up in Steph's session last week was what's in it for wealthy people? Like why do they care? What's benefiting them in this work of wealth redistribution? And I wanted to respond to that and just say so much. There's so much, and I'll just speak on, continue speaking on behalf of wealthy people, but there's so much in it for us to get to heal from the wounds that we carry, from the inaccurate messages we carry about our own self-worth, sense of belonging. Thank you for that. There's such a beautiful opportunity for a lot of healing and change, a lot of growth, a lot of restoring one's sense of integrity and dignity, I think is one of the most satisfying, beautiful experiences we can have as human beings. So if someone's giving you the opportunity and the invitation to move towards more integrity, to move towards like that courageous type of integrity, I think that's one of the best gifts we can offer people. And so again, I know it's so easy when we're fundraising. I see there's a lot of fundraisers in the call. It's easy to move to this place of like, I'm asking this person for a favor. And I encourage you to shift your stance and instead say, I'm inviting this person into something really beautiful that I believe in. I'm inviting them into, hopefully you believe in the thing you're fundraising for. And if you don't, that's something for you to work on. But assuming you believe in the project you're fundraising for, you're giving this person an opportunity to participate. You're giving them an opportunity to work on their relationship with money and power. And you're giving them an opportunity to start to do that work in part in relationship with you. So I think fundraising is a gift, just like I think giving people feedback is a gift, right? So for those of you who aren't fundraisers, but who work with wealth holders, I really invite you to start giving feedback to your clients when they act badly. And that might be scary, that might be daunting. But again, when we give people feedback on the ways in which their behavior is causing harm, the ways in which their behavior is negatively affecting their relationships in ways they don't know, you're giving them a gift and an opportunity to change. And there's always a risk there. There's a risk the person will run away and never talk to you again, just like there's a risk in giving anybody feedback. But I believe underneath the feedback is saying, I believe in you and I expect better from you. And I think that that's also a gift. And again, that's where we're really moving from transactional work, wealth, services for the wealthy, to more transformational work, donor organizing, when we have the audacity to give feedback to someone who, especially someone who holds more power than us. I think that's part of what makes this work move towards being a bit more transformational. Any questions about what's in it for wealth holders? We had some people add stuff in the chat too, which is beautiful. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing and then we will spend the rest of the time, I think, maybe just talking. So this is one last document for you all. And this is called The 10 Hard Truths About Life That the Wealth Defense Industry Wants You to Forget. And so the wealth defense industry is a term that was coined by my beloved colleague, Chuck Collins, who, if you don't know Chuck Collins, I encourage you to check out his books. He's an amazing author. He was an heir to some hot dog company and made a lot of money and gave it all away. And he's awesome. The wealth defense industry is kind of a cheeky term to indicate anyone whose profession is to defend the wealth of the wealthy. So financial advisors, investment managers, tax planners, estate attorneys, people working with trust funds and so on. Thank you for the link, Ivan. That's the wealth defense industry. For those of you who work in the wealth defense industry, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I'm not trying to say all of you are bad, but I am trying to say we know that the compensation, right, of people in this industry is based on your ability to protect wealth, right? So these are the 10 hard truths that the wealth defense industry wants you to forget. And I have found this to be a really useful tool to offer clients to really reflect on these before making big financial choices. So let's just take a moment and can we read it out loud? Because I know I'm going to be, Ivan's obviously game. I'm going to put it in the chat and I would like you to just boldly unmute yourself and or maybe raise your hand and I'll call on you and we'll just take a moment, statement by statement, reading these and just seeing how they land. Okay. Can we get a volunteer to go first? Ivan, come on.
All right. Somebody better jump in. So 10 hard truths about life the wealth defense industry wants you to forget. Reread these before making big financial choices. Number 1, I cannot ensure that my loved ones will be happy, no matter how hard I try.
Everyone I know and love will one day die.
I too will one day die. No one knows how or when that will happen.
Most choices close a door. Few choices will be 100% just right and without sacrifice or grief.
So life consistently does not go as expected. Life laughs at my rigid plans and my numerous backup plans.
The only constant is change. Everything is changing all the time.
Okay. No one can tell me exactly what will happen. I can do another one. That was really short. I cannot take a single material thing with me when I die.
Even if you're an ancient Egyptian. One more.
Yes, I will probably be forgotten within a handful of generations.
I will never have total certainty or control. because I am a human being, not a god. And to be human is to be insecure. To be human is not to know. I'm sorry, to be human is to not know.
You got it. Thank you. So let's just take a moment and notice what it feels like to be in these statements, how they impact you. And I welcome any reflections, feelings that come up for you in the chat.
I just have a quick, fast reaction because I really think it's imperative that if this ecosystem is to change, we need to be constantly invoking mortality and death of our time. This will get us into generational thinking. It will get us into also non-human centered lifespans. But if we need to open the door to speaking about death and endings and mortality in spaces where we talk about economic and social justice. And this is simply not done nearly enough.
Yeah.
And unless we start this ecosystem doesn't stand a chance. Living from short-term mindedness to project orientation to quick checklists to limits of growth.
Others, I see that they're liberating, identify with them, helps relieve your unrealistic perfectionism. Does anyone else feel relieved when you hear these? Yeah, I feel like such a relief. I feel like I can breathe more, feel a lot more spaciousness, right? Because it cuts through to what's most important about life. And I think this is another tool we can use to get past the boogeyman, to get past these fear-based ways of relating to power and control, and instead move towards more vulnerability and surrender. Because the truth is, whatever your role is, if you're a fundraiser, if you organize wealth holders, if you're wealthy and you're organizing your peers, on some level, you're probably hopefully guiding your people towards engaging with these ideas, even in small ways. Like, we're breaking the illusion that we can use money to control. We actually ultimately can. We're breaking the illusion for ourselves, for other people, that we can pretend to know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're breaking the illusion that we can control how other people feel about us. There's so many illusions that a lot of people make a lot of money off of you believing. And so that's, again, why I see this work as of fundraising, of organizing, as deeply spiritual, and really, really deep, because underneath it, right, are these truths about our mortality and about our the illusions that we're all living inside of all the time. So this is a resource I give to clients when before making decisions about how much money to give away, before making having a conversation where they know they're going to be fundraised, before having a conversation with their financial advisor, with their spouse, with their parents, as just a tool to come back to center, to put our feet on the ground and come back to reality, and not be in the frenetic energy of fear and trying to kind of grasp for control. Okay, I think I've talked enough, and I think we can stop the recording, and we can go into the chaos of opening it up to a group of 39 people. But yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody has reflections that they want to share. And Ivan, do you mind stopping the recording?
Yeah, so thank you so much for guiding us so far, Iris.